this morning as we examine this book. It's one of two books in the Bible named after women. The other one is Esther. But we begin with the man Elimelech and his wife Naomi. And they have two sons named Mahlon and Chilion. Now right away, if we're reading this in Hebrew, we are tipped off to how the story will go because of the meanings of the sons' names. Mahlon is the name used for the disease the Egyptians are afflicted with in Exodus 15:26. And Chilion simply translates into English as to perish. This does not bode well for either. So our clue is this story has foreshadowing. And there is famine in the land where they dwell, Bethlehem, which in Hebrew means the house of bread. It will also become the city of David. More foreshadowing. So with famine in the house of bread, the family departs Bethlehem for Moab. Moab is the name of one of Lot's grandsons in the book of Genesis. And it is also the land east of the Dead Sea in a mountainous area. So the family travels almost directly east to find food. Now this can't have been an easy decision, as the people of Israel did not think well of the people of Moab. In Deuteronomy chapter 23, verse 3, it says, "No Ammonite or Moabite or any of their descendants may enter the assembly of the Lord, not even in the 10th generation." And many of the prophets, including Jeremiah and Isaiah, prophesy against the Moabites. The books of Ezra and Nehemiah both tell the Israelites who had remained behind in the promised land during the exile and who had intermarried with other people in the area, including the Moabites, who are named, to leave those wives and marry real Jewish girls. So Moab was a neighbor and was extended family, but not well regarded by the Israelites. And yet off to Moab the family went, because that was where there was food. And at some time after this move, Elimelech dies. Life was hard in those days. The two sons come of age and marry. They marry local Moabite girls. And then after about 10 years in the land of Moab, the book tells us, the sons also die in quick succession. So that leaves the three women all alone and without legal rights. So something must be done. When news comes that the famine in Israel is over, Naomi decides to return home to the land of her birth. And she bids her daughters-in-law, Orpah and Ruth, goodbye and tells them to return to their families and find new husbands. Well, Orpah complies after a tearful separation, but Ruth does not. Ruth simply will not leave Naomi. She responds with one of the great oaths of loyalty of all time. Where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. So let's take a look at that historic show of loyalty. This is a young woman, probably still a teenager, who turns her back on her home country and swears her allegiance to a nation which regards her as a worthless person, from a hated people, estranged members of the family who are now regarded as enemies. See, the countries of Israel and Moab bordered on each other, and they tended to be rivals. They were often raiding across the borders. There was a lot of fighting going on, and there was a lot of bad blood here. Ruth had to know that she would be held in low esteem and even hated in the land of Israel. Yet she swears to stay with Naomi, to be her family, and to worship her God, a God she now considers to be her own. She will land she does not know and where she has never been. She decides to face life with her mother-in-law and to worship the God of Israel. Now, the point of our story, to find one, is that God is chosen. Ruth is choosing to follow God, and God also chooses. There must be something in the worship of the God of Israel that appeals to Ruth, something she has not found in the gods that she has worshipped before. Maybe it's something in the Torah, in the scriptures, or maybe it's something in the character of this God of Israel's people and what she has heard living in this household. This God who saves may speak to her in a way she has never felt before. And it makes a tough trip worth the risk. So Naomi and Ruth return to the land of Judah, but find life is still difficult for two women with no property rights. Naomi's husband Elimelech held rights to property there, but Naomi cannot claim it. As a woman in ancient Israel, she has no rights and has no living son to make the claim. Instead, they must rely on a kinsman, Boaz. Naomi directs Ruth to the fields of Boaz, as it is time for the barley harvest, and tells her to glean in the fields after the workers have gone through, picking up the leftovers. So Boaz sees Ruth in the fields with the other poor women who are picking up what is left after the harvesters have done their work, and he asks who she is. And apparently Ruth has spoken to some of them because they tell Boaz her story. She is the wife of the dead son of your kinsman Elimelech, here with her mother-in-law Naomi. Ruth is from Moab, and now they are back in Jerusalem, or in Bethlehem, sorry. Boaz instructs the workers to leave her alone and let her glean, and to leave a little extra behind so she can find enough for the two women to eat. Boaz also speaks directly to Ruth and tells her what he has done. Well, that's a nice gesture, but the barley harvest only lasts for so long, and hunger will be a problem for the two afterwards, even if they have enough to eat now and if they can save enough to eat for some little time after. So Naomi instructs Ruth some more. It seems that Naomi has also been gathering information. Naomi tells the girl to go down to the threshing floor at the evening, and after Boaz has eaten and drunk and gone to bed for the night, to go to him. With harvesting nearing an end, there will be celebrations and a time of partying. It'll be festive. And since Boaz has already acknowledged Ruth, Naomi decides it's time to be a little more direct. So Ruth goes to Boaz after he is asleep, and the Bible tells us, uncovers his feet. This is a biblical euphemism. The use of feet here actually means something a little higher up. No, higher. Yes, there. And she also lays at his feet. She has uncovered his, lower body. And during the night, Boaz wakes up and finds this young woman there. He doesn't seem upset about the situation, but he does caution her to leave in the morning before it's light and before anyone sees, which she does. Now, it is settled that Boaz is a close family member and has a right to marry Ruth and inherit the property of Elimelech, but he knows of another closer relative, someone who has a prior claim, and that relative must legally be offered the right first. So the next day, Boaz goes down to the city gate, the ancient Israel version of the county courthouse, and he makes sure there is a quorum of the elders, that is, the town officials, and he approaches this other family member, because anybody who is anybody comes to the gate in the morning so the business can be handled. The other man is interested in the property, but does not want to marry Ruth, and so he passes his rights on to Boaz. The legality settled, Boaz is married to Ruth, the property is redeemed into the family, and Ruth and Naomi become part of the family of Boaz. Now, we've got a lot going on in this story for 4 chapters of the Bible. There's the life and death story of 2 women who are working to make sure that they do not starve to death, even in the house of bread. And then there's the legal procedural, the ancient Israel version of Law and Order, with the always thrilling drama of property rights and inheritance duties. And the veiled story of innuendo lurks in the background. And in the final look, there is this story of redemption on a number of levels. We have the redemption of property, the redemption of the lives of these 2 women, and as it turns out, the redemption of Israel, and ultimately the redemption of us, of you and me. Boaz redeemed the property of Elimelech. He redeemed it, gained the legal rights to it by accepting the responsibilities attached. That is, he married Ruth, the daughter-in-law of the deceased, and then gained rights to the family property by agreeing to provide for the surviving family. Boaz redeemed the property in a legal sense, and redeemed the women in a moral sense. Then we are told the child Obed, born of the marriage of Boaz and Ruth, becomes the grandfather of King David, the greatest of the kings of Israel. David will redeem the people of Israel before God and unite the Jewish people to their greatest hour. This marriage and the child born of it will result in the heights of their kingdom. And the Gospel of Matthew tells us in its genealogy of Jesus that this is the line of which Joseph comes and into which Jesus is born. Matthew even stretches us back a few generations and takes us back to Tamar and her child fathered by the patriarch Judah in a sordid story from Genesis chapter 38 of another woman who had to use subterfuge to get men to give her the rights that she had under the law. Matthew mentions Ruth, Tamar, and Rahab the prostitute as all being ancestors of the human Jesus. And 2 of those, Ruth and Rahab, are foreigners. All 3 of them were scorned by the good people. And here they are in the biblical story, being redeemed. Stories in the Bible often mean one thing on one level and something else to those of us that are outside the immediate conditions of the story. In the strictest sense, it is the property being redeemed. That is a legal term referring to the passage of property rights from one individual to another, and in the same sense that you redeem a coupon. The story of Ruth itself holds the meaning of Ruth being the one redeemed through the action of Boaz in fulfilling her legal rights and taking on the responsibility of providing for Ruth and by extension for Naomi. The other cousin, we never learned the name of, wanted the rights but not the responsibility. Boaz accepted both. How much of this was due to certain enticements? Well, we'll never know for sure. On another level, this union leads to the redemption of the nation of Israel in the institution of the monarchy. David is remembered as the ideal and greatest king of the nation of Israel. The marriage of Boaz and Ruth and the child produced leads directly to the birth of David. And the whole nation benefits from this as it enters a golden age. And through the line of David is born Jesus. And in him, we are all redeemed. The significance of the story for us as Christians is the connection to the birth of our Savior. We learn from this that there are some odd-looking branches in the family tree of Jesus. We find foreigners, prostitutes, and people of questionable character. It's a mess, really. These people are a bunch of sinners, after all. And so are we. People have not changed, not since the time of Jesus or even since the time of Ruth. We still act the same. We still need help, someone to redeem us from our sin. And fortunately for us, God has provided a Redeemer in Jesus. The Son of God came into the world not to condemn, but to save. And as we draw near to the Advent season, we celebrate the coming of our Rock and our Redeemer. It's a messy business, but it leads to our salvation.